So welcome back to the roundtable on the impact of the corona crisis. This next hour is a bit more action-oriented. First, we'll hear from 3 students about their experiences, and then we'll launch into discussion. And I think we'll not take questions directly to the students, but make that part of the discussion. So please, if you have questions for them, take note of them somewhere so you don't forget, so we can have a useful and lively discussion. To introduce this section, I've asked my colleague. He's extraordinary professor here at the Nordic Africa Institute. And when we had an advisory meeting about this roundtable, he insisted there has to be student perspectives, and I'll leave to him to explain why that is so important.
Thanks so much, Kaisa, and welcome everyone. It's a little bit absurd almost that the oldest participant, meaning me, I am as old as I look, opens now the round with the contributions by the 3 youngest participants in that chat. But I think age does not really matter when it comes to tackling social challenges and problems. While I think I'm a dinosaur, I hope that my mindset is a current one. And while I cannot preempt what the 3 students have to say, and I'm very keen to listen, because especially my age group should learn not to talk as much as we do, but to listen more, and then think twice before we talk, I would like to share a few concerns which basically contribute in a nutshell to the debate. And they engage on 2 levels with knowledge production and knowledge transmission. And I think the one is class and the other one is the meaning of knowledge. Now, what do I mean? And I have just 3.5 minutes left. With class, I mean there are social inequalities in existence. And we don't have to go back to Pierre Bourdieu, who stressed that as an important contribution in the 60s on the nature or the double nature of education. Class matters. Now, in our current societies, institutionalized access to higher education and the transmission of knowledge can be used as an instrument to reduce class. But if we now are forced by circumstances to relocate education into the home, then it's not part of a solution, but exacerbates the problem. The home situation of students reflects a class position, and the environment conducive to learning is the one of a middle and upper class. So students who are now relegated back to a home environment are facing the disadvantages which life on campus to a certain extent can reduce, not eliminate, but reduce. So I think we need to be aware of that. And the second aspect is the one of the so-called hidden curriculum. Pedagogy matters. And I believe that a transfer of humanist education, which I hope is the ultimate goal of education, being emancipatory and humanist, requires empathy and compassion, and that requires personal human interaction. While we can get along with a nice debate as of today, I strongly feel it cannot totally replace human interaction, which means eye-to-eye interaction, which means empathy, which means emotions, which means feelings as part of a learning process and the transmission of knowledge. Knowledge is not a neutral affair. It means empowerment also in the sense of human empowerment. And it's very interesting that just now Silicon Valley jumps on the bandwagon and sees an opportunity to transfer higher education into one which is entirely based on the kind of communication we are doing now. And an interesting comment in the New York Times magazine said, I quote, Will big tech's entry into education reduce our humanity? And I think it's a challenge we are confronted with for the time in the post-corona exceptional circumstances. And I think we should be aware that we don't enter traps. Yes, we can exploit opportunities, which by force of circumstances we are confronted with, but we should not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I would like to end with a quote from an article, and I will share with all of you the links to 2 articles which I feel quite relevant in that context. It says, this article, technology doesn't fix social problems. People do. But deployed unreflectively, technology can reify or even enhance social differences and inequalities, locking into algorithms very human decisions that are biased as the social systems they automate. And I think that's the risk and the danger I see. But that's the view of a dinosaur. Now it's up to us to listen to the young ones.
Thank you for that introduction, Henning. And I'll call first on Claudia Esidentu. She's a final year student at private Ashesi University in Ghana. And I believe she does not have a camera, but we can hear from her. You have 5 minutes. We'll let you know when 2 minutes are left.
All right, thank you, Kaiser. So this is Claudia. She introduced me, and as she said before, I'm to give a personal reflection on how the coronavirus has affected me and what my school has done so far to, deal with this new pandemic that has affected the whole world. I, for one, have been stuck in my room for months since schools closed down. Personally, I'm not much of an outing type, but what is new is the feeling of restlessness that comes with knowing that you can't just go anywhere when you need to or when you want to due to the risk involved. I was set to graduate on May 30th before COVID-19. As an upcoming graduate, I had lots of plans to carry out, and it's sad seeing all these plans come to a halt. However, as a human, we are created and built to adapt to different situations, and I believe I've been coping pretty well and hoping the world will soon overcome this pandemic. For my university, Ashesi University, the school has done pretty well in successfully adapting its curriculum to incorporate new changes as a result of the COVID-19. The school has successfully moved all of its lectures online, making use of the Zoom app and Canvas for its teaching and learning. Also, the school has made arrangements with telecommunication companies to supply monthly internet bundle to students. Such a move has made it possible for all groups of students to join lectures on Zoom and emails, Canvas, everywhere that we need to interact with our lecturers and our mates. For final year students like me, our thesis and our project is still in the pipeline. The school has created a system where we can access the resource database from our homes. There are good initiatives. All these initiatives by my school has been very helpful to with the whole Ashesi students body, but not everyone has been able to, use the internet. The online learning couldn't cater for all the different group of Ashesi students. There are students who live in communities where there is no internet access. These students have no option than to wait for the pandemic to be over so they can go back to the classroom. For some of us, with respect to the online learning, it's been hard to pay attention in class. The absence of the environment to, keep that focus is making it hard to, pay attention and follow some of the lectures that happen online. Various discussions with some of my mates also revealed that it's hard for them to also follow during online lectures. This is all new, and this is all new to us, and it's taking some time for some of us to completely adjust when we have only known a physical classroom all our lives. However, there are also some students who have fully embraced the change. Some students also have to balance house chores with schoolwork, and it hasn't been too easy for them. They complain a lot on the WhatsApp groups and in email how they need to bath babies, do this and that, and we are still required to submit our assignments, our projects.
2 minutes remaining. 2 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mila. Also, most of the final year students at Ashesi have been real sad with respect to events how events have turned out. We're supposed to graduate May 30th, as I said. The sadness of leaving school rid us of final school days with our friends, our lecturers, moments like our last days moment. We do keep up via social media and through phone calls. However, it isn't the same. This was supposed to be our graduation month, and now we don't even know what the future holds. Same with national service. It's like you want to make plans and think about the future, but how can you make such plans when you are so uncertain of the future? This is my view and my take on the whole coronavirus pandemic and how it has affected me, measures my school has put in place, and how my mates and I have been affected by it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and we feel with you. These are very uncertain times. Thank you for sharing your experience. We stay in Ghana, and I asked Titilope Ayayi, who is a PhD candidate at Public University of Ghana, and also the founder of the online resource doing a PhD in Africa, to tell us about life as a graduate student at this point.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, but we cannot see
Awesome.
you. Let's see.
I just put my video back on.
Yeah, if
Can
possible.
you see me now?
To see you.
Okay. Should I go ahead?
Can we see you? Yeah.
My video is on.
Okay, sorry. It's just me who had a setting that
Okay.
couldn't see you. There you are. Go ahead. Please, you have 5 minutes.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So, as has been said, I'm in the final year of my PhD, and I also coordinate an online-based community of PhD scholars across Africa, which is called Doing a PhD in Africa, which I think is a very good empirical illustration of how technology can be leveraged to support either PhD or other learning. And I can expand on that later since I don't have much time. So my university is also closed. It's been closed since March. And because I'm in my final year, I don't have issues with online learning. Although I see that we're starting to do Vivas online. I just started seeing the announcements last week. I haven't attended one yet, so I don't know how that's going to go. I also don't know what it means for graduation, but I'm monitoring the process. But I do know that there are issues with access to online learning for undergraduate students and for PhD students in their first year. At my university, the first year is when you do coursework. So the crisis hit in the middle of the second semester for most of these students, and I know that they've had challenges. And one of the comments that came from the PhD group that I was talking about is from Omolara in Nigeria, and she says, I'm reading, transition to e-learning is not working for some students. Some universities either don't have the right infrastructure or the lecturers are not well prepared to run online classes. And this echoes some of the things that were said earlier. The second issue area for me has been my field work. I was due to go to Lagos in March to do the final leg of data collection, which obviously is no longer possible. And this is an issue also for other colleagues that I've spoken to. And what I've done, how I've tried to manage this, is substituting the in-person for digital interviews. And that raises 3 issues. First is whether this is acceptable methodologically, and it's something that I still need to find out from my department. I'm in international relations. The second issue has to do with connectivity. I've had connectivity on my end and connectivity on the end of the participants that I'm talking to. I have had interviews where Skype wouldn't work. At that point, Zoom wasn't such a big, it wasn't such a popular platform. So I've had interviews where Skype was working so badly that I had to resort to WhatsApp. And I couldn't do a call because the other person's connectivity was bad. And so what we ended up doing was using voice notes. And you can imagine how stressful that was, having to wait for the person to answer and then listen before you can ask another question. The interview took 3 hours. It should have taken 45 minutes. And the other issue also is by doing it this way, you're indirectly forcing your participants to bear the costs of your research, and that has all kinds of ethical implications. And then the last point I had was about productivity. So I was supposed to go to Lagos to present a paper at a workshop there, which has been postponed. We don't know yet whether it's going to end up being a virtual conversation, but the purpose of my going there was to present something that I'm working on, which I was planning to get published later this year. Obviously, since that can't happen at the moment, then it has implications for when and whether, in fact, I can
2
publish.
minutes remaining.
Okay, thank you. For when and whether I can publish it. So it has implications for my writing process. So I think since I have 2 minutes, I'll just go back to where I started and talk about PhD in Africa very quickly. So some of the things that we've done, like I mentioned, were online based. So for example, we have had surveys, for instance, on the challenges facing PhD students in Africa, and the results of that survey informed most of the content that you'll see on our website, and I can share that in the link in the chat. The other thing that we've done more recently is that we've organized bi-monthly, what we call them peer support forums, where if you're a PhD student at any African institution, you can come and raise questions or concerns about any aspects of your PhD program, whether it's to do with the technical writing or research process, or whether it's to do with relations with your supervisors, anything that has a bearing on your PhD experience. So I will stop there and look forward to the conversations.
Thank you so much, Titilope, and so generous of you to also share your network with us and views from all your followers on doing a PhD in Africa. And please do share a link in the chat so that others who are interested can find your resource. Last in this part, we have Marcia Manhik. She's a PhD candidate at Uppsala University and Eduardo Mondlane University in Mozambique. So please, Marcia, let's hear from you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. As Kaira
The sound
said,
is very low.
I'm
Can you
PhD
try to turn up your volume?
Okay. Hi again. I say that I'm PhD student. I started this year. I'm enrolled in the course that Prof. Stennis is giving now about democracy and public engagement in anthropology. Related to, from my experience, it has been, it is an unexpected situation because I was preparing myself to go to Sweden to study there, and I saw myself. I saw that we had to change our plans, so we have to start from Mozambique. I said, okay, this is fine. At least I'm going to start. This is good for me because I'm not losing time, and I have opportunity to learn to do the course even at home. But I have to say that sometimes I find I find some kind of limitations related to my connection. I remember once that I lost the lesson, the presentation of Professor Stein, and it is something complicated because sometimes you are following the lesson and suddenly the connection go down, so you have to get in, try to connect again. But as we record our lessons, I have opportunity to go back to the platform and try to listen to it again, and that is good for me. So we have some difficulties related to the cost of internet, but I think that we are also reinventing ourselves, looking for ways to make it possible to do the course. In general, just to show some kind of experience from other colleagues, what is happening at Eduardo Mondlane University is that the teachers now are giving lessons. It has been a complex process because we have some structural issues to take into account. Some structural issues related to poverty, but also related to some kind of limitations on the use of digital instruments. Like we have some teachers that were not or are not prepared to teach by this kind of platform. So they are now looking for ways to learn to do it. Okay, thank you. They are learning to do that. So it's time that is going. But in general, we are using email, WhatsApp groups to have lessons. So people are trying to do their best. We can see from our colleagues, from our friends, they are looking for ways to have lessons, but we can't uh, we can't uh, we can I think that we have also to consider that there are some students that have limitations to have lessons in this kind of platforms, because some of them do come to university but they don't have computer, or if they have, they still have some difficulties to use it. So it's something that we also we are facing here. But just to finish, I have to say that people are trying to do their best to have lessons from WhatsApp and from email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for sharing your experiences so far. Sad that you cannot be with us here in Sweden at the moment, but hopefully we'll get to see you sometime soon. I wanted us to launch into discussion. As we prepare to do so, I'd like to first call on Grace Idahosa, who's a visiting scholar here at NI at this point. If you want to share your experiences too, I think are quite interesting with how COVID has affected you and your research that is also on higher education. So maybe you want to say one or two words. After Grace comes in, Desire had a question for Sten that was never addressed. It was about pedagogy being during lockdown. How can it be improved? You wanted to expand on that, Sten. And after that, I'm going to open the floor. So please write here. I see names being added to the group chat. So we'll take it from there. First Grace and then Sten.
Okay, thank you, Kaiser. I'm not sure where to start, but I think the first thing to say is that at the moment I am stuck in terms of not being able to go back home. So there are no flights and anything. And for some reason, I didn't prepare my mind for that. I just thought when 15th Friday, I'm out of here, I can go back and get back into my work. Or at least settle down before getting back, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So now I am trying to rearrange my life in terms of this week, for instance, I decided, okay, I need to start going to the office because I have deadlines that I have to meet, and the sometimes you're not able to extend these deadlines even if the situations are difficult. So I am working on a report now that I have to send in tomorrow. Sorry, today is Thursday, yeah, on 15th Friday, and that can't be pushed. Yeah, apart from that, I think it's another thing that's been challenging is and partly surprising for me is the mental health effects of this. It's not something that you really think about because as academics, we are naturally prone to isolation and being in our own silos and all those things. So you think, oh, it's fine. Anyways, it's like every other day for me. But there is something about that freedom being taken away from you, where you're not the one making the decision to stay at home or lock yourself for like 1 or 2 weeks in some without talking to people or meeting people face to face, and that's been difficult. I mean, I've always said I don't like people anyways, so I don't need to see people. And then in the last 4 weeks, I've realized that I actually do cherish the face-to-face meetings in the office and everything. In relation to my work, that's been a little bit, I think, more challenging because so it spills over from the mental and emotional issues to being able to work and being able to do things at the same capacity or level that you were doing them before the pandemic started, and that's been difficult. I don't think I've been able to provide a solution for myself. Now I'm just trying different things. And I think the last thing I want to talk about is the actual work that I do. So my research focuses on agency in relation to transforming higher education. And in the last few weeks, I've had to think about the impact of the move to e-learning and the impact of digitization on say transformation or even just the higher education context in general. And just on a side note, my research is mainly focused on South African higher education. And some of the things I've been thinking about are kind of the challenges that higher education institutions in South Africa face, because there's an intersection of race and class in terms of who has access at the university level, at the level of the academic, at the level of the student, also of who has access to be able to participate in these online learning in online learning processes. So at the level of the institution, for instance, in South Africa, we have the historically white universities and the historically black universities. And the historically white universities are more equipped to be able to actually make this shift easily, whereas the historically black universities find it more difficult because in the first place, they do not have the necessary infrastructure, some of them set up to be able to make that move, that smooth transition. So for instance, some lecturers are still giving their notes, paper course outlines, or they just send it via email. So they don't use like platforms like Blackboard or Moodle and all these things. Now they're having to, like some people mentioned in the presentations, now they're having to kind of amp up these platforms to enable students to learn. But aside that, then you deal with the issue of access to data and access to the necessary to internet to be able to even for students, even academics, to access this platform. And at the level of the academics, which is like my primary interest, so I try to understand academic staff agency to contribute to transformation. So even whether they are staff or they occupy, whether they academics or they occupy leadership positions within the university. And
Thank you, Grace. I think it's your research really is interesting because it looks at the nuts and bolts of transformation in the university, and as you say, you might have to, shift a little bit with the Corona crisis coming to land in your lap. Literally, you've been very much affected personally, but I think also for the academics and the staff that you study, it's interesting to see how COVID affects their agency. I will hand over to Sten. There was a question for you, and you have also told us you have something you would like to bring up, so you can have some space to do both.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the question. And it was about what can be done of pedagogic development during the corona. And I think that I echo what other people have said, that of course this is how to make do in a complicated situation. I'm not saying that this is a true alternative. It's just thinking what can be done and how can we make use of this historical situation. One thing that I find important is that you can share PDF files and readings quite easily, even though people are not you have a problem with a connection. You can send text and tell people, well, you have to read the text in advance. And then, of course, if you have power cut, eventually, hopefully, power will come back and you will be able to be able to read it. So I think that kind of the balance between, on one hand, a kind of direct teaching in and talking, and also having this kind of preparatory aspect of the work. Maybe and also an experience that we learned long before COVID is also not to use PowerPoints so much in this kind of medium, because PowerPoint eats a lot of capacity of internet. So I think this is not at all a comment to what happened today. I think it was great presentations, but that instead of PowerPoint, you can share the PowerPoint in advance. You can send it and so on, and try to be shorter, have more of interaction in your talking. So I'm just thinking these are the things I think we can learn from this very unpleasant experience. Then a final point, and I think many people have brought it up. It's the WhatsApp groups. I tend to say that an armed group that would like to affirm itself in the Malian turmoil, the first thing they do is to get a Twitter account or a WhatsApp account. So in a very complicated circumstances, we see that social media are used in all these kind of groups. And I think that most of us, we have our smartphones, plenty of silly pictures and things going on, what's going on. I mean, you're connected in various ways. But if you create using this kind of WhatsApp groups, we have a group in Messenger that we use. When we started, we just said, don't share, this kind of funny things, just share professional things. Having a kind of situation whereby you are not going to get this kind of conspiracy theories or whatever people are sharing, but get things focused on the topic. And I think that is one way of being a bit disciplined from what you are sharing. Because if you get 20 photos of somebody who is dealing with corona or are questioning so and so, well, then after a while you will have people leaving the group. And all this comes to my comment. And I think this is maybe where the Association of African University together with us could make a difference. And that is to push for open access. And not just open access in the sense of opening up a little or doing a kind of marketing campaign, but really push for open access. So that when these things are available, when the articles are available, that we can use them. And I think that is one of the kind of main things. Not a miracle, not a panacea at all, but at least something that could be a very concrete step. And to push the big technological corporations of Silicon Valley, as Henning said. So I think there is something there. My last point about in the response or connection to what Grace said a few minutes ago. I fully sense your concern about this loneliness and so on. And what we have done with my 2 PhD students from Mozambique in Uppsala, living in small studios, is that given that we don't have a complete confinement in Sweden, we have started walk and talk supervision. So we are walking outdoors. So we are walking to Gamla Uppsala, we are walking in the forest, or we are walking and as a way to have a kind of meaningful social interaction. Because I think we have good reasons to be very worried what this happens to us psychologically and socially, and even more so if you are not at home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sten. Is that close to your department, or if Grace or anyone else wanted to join? Is it like one-on-one, or it's a group?
Absolutely. We can walk to Gamla Uppsala together. Grass.
That's lovely. Grace, did you hear that? I wanted to hand over to Mireille. She had a comment.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sten, and everyone for those presentations. It's not really a comment, but just to ask a question. Yes, about electricity shortage. I would like to know, maybe be more to know, know if it's a particular problem in Cameroon or in Central Africa, or there are other states in Africa that face the same problem, because I think without electricity access, we can't have access to internet. So it's just a question I'm addressing to university staff, academics of other places in Africa, just to know, to have a view, compare. Is it how does it work in South Africa or West Africa? Because here in Central Africa, in Cameroon in particular, it's a great problem. Almost all the regions are affected about that, and we have been really affected during this particular pandemic context. So that's all what I want to know.
Yes, so let's have a few voices on that. Maybe Nodomo, would you like to say something about power issues, maybe across the continent, and then if anyone else has witnessed things they want to say.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's an African problem. Many countries face that problem. And I think one of the things that we keep reflecting on is how we can take advantage of alternative sources of power. So we need, I think, as a continent, to begin to operationalize some of the talk that we've been making about Africa has so much sun, but how are we using that as an alternative source of power? And also, of course, securing the data centers where the learning management systems sit is also very important. And maybe also thinking of ways that people can charge their devices. I think there are quite a number of initiatives, particularly from East Africa, where they've come up with the innovations around charging your devices, even in areas where there's limited power. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to come in on the power issue? Otherwise, Claudia was next. Oh, Desire, it was about the power. I saw you had your hand up.
Yes, that's that.
Okay, so let's take Desire first and then Claudia. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just to comment on that, in the South African context, we've been having a lot of load shedding lately. But since the lockdown, there's not been any load shedding. So power is not a problem at the moment.
Thank you. Then it's Claudia.
Okay, thank you, Kaiser. So my question is to Sten with respect to working outdoors with the students and going to the forest here and there. Do you practice social distance? And if you do, how does it actually combat the loneliness people are facing? Because here the case that if you have to pay attention to keeping distance from people, then you are working alone. So I want to understand more into how the walking around and everything helps the person or helps you people.
That's a direct question for Sten.
Should I reply?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, it's just that we felt that it's important that we meet anyway. We can have supervision by Zoom, and then we decided why not have walk and talk supervision in the sense that we are walking around, and because in Sweden it's okay to be outdoors, but you have to keep 2 meters from each other. So we have a kind of, you can have an ongoing conversation about PhD issues. Of course, you're not taking notes like that, but it's a combination of talking about the PhD topic or the thesis or the organization of the work, but of course also try to get some social contact in this complicated situation. This is of course due to the fact that we have in Sweden, it has been completely fine to be outdoors and walk with people. So it's not a very big issue. It was just a very clear way to make sure that people are not falling into depression or all these kind of things, because this is a tough situation for all of us. Thank you.
This crisis seems to be a lot about balancing interests. I mean, it's the health interest versus the livelihood interest, and it's also the COVID risks versus the mental health risks of loneliness. So it's really a balance, and since Sweden still allows us to be out and about, then we're taking, I think that's an excellent way of doing it, Stian. Thank you for sharing. Titi Lupe has said she wants to come in, and then it's Henning on the list.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, so I just wanted, it's not about power. I just wanted to flag something that came up on Twitter. I've been tweeting certain parts of this conversation. And somebody just commented that universities in Nigeria, some of them apparently are charging students extra for online classes, and the amounts are as high as $500. I just wanted to put that on the table.
Wow, yeah, so that's another aspect. I heard from other parts of the world, students are demanding their fees back because online classes they feel is on a different level and should be charged as an university education in person when it goes offline. Thank you for sharing that, Titi Lopez. So Henning is next.
It relates to that because there is a material aspect to online teaching. And it's not only access to power, it's access to internet and the costs of having access to internet, depending on where you are. And in some rural areas, I know it from South Africa and from Namibia, students who have been relocated back home to their families, they simply have no access to internet because there's no Wi-Fi, or they have to purchase it through their private cell phones. And then it's at exorbitant costs because telecommunication in some of the African countries is charging an arms and a leg. And then also you have the limitations to circulate PDFs for download. And again, it brings back the social background and the material background of the students at the receiving end. We need to be constantly aware that when we discuss these technologies, we are facing social economic realities which provide opportunities for some and deny opportunities to others.
Thank you, Henning, for reminding us of that. I think Claudia was sharing that as well, that her classmates in Ghana, some of them are not able because of costs or because of the area that your family house is in, you're not able to be part. I think that's very important. The Alliance for Affordable Internet usually puts out a yearly report, and African countries have the most expensive access to the internet in the world. Yes.
And may I just add, because that showed the importance of listening to those on the quote-unquote receiving end, because all three of them, in one way or another, highlighted those constraints, which we sometimes tend to lose sight of. And it's so important to consider that perspective and bring it in. I'm so grateful that we had these three voices.
No, it was much thanks to you. So thank you for hosting them. Marcia is next.
Yes, just to add the comment related to the costs. One of the issues that is being discussed in Mozambique is related to the fees, because we have private universities and they want to charge for those months that that students are not having lessons. So more than discussing what are going to be done during this time, last month the universities and the students were discussing about fees, if they have to pay or not. And the students and their fathers doesn't want to pay because the students are not having lessons at school. So this is one of the issues that we are dealing with now, just to share. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for sharing issues with fees also in Mozambique. Titelope also adds in the chat. She wanted to ask how universities are accounting for fees already paid vis-a-vis purported costs of transitioning to online. So I think all these issues are things we need to keep an eye on. And of course, the general context is that higher education on the continent, the costs for it is more and more pushed to the individual, to the families. It's no more, generally, even for the public universities, it's no more public good. It's now something you cash and carry like many other social services. I mean, a few countries are exempt, like Senegal, who is providing free higher education. At this point, we need to wrap up. We have 4 more minutes. I'm looking at Lisa. I don't know if you can see, I'm looking at her, but I would like for her to say a few words to close up. Lisa and I, as she mentioned, we have a project on higher education focusing on political science, but we are interested in kind of expanding onto other issues. So this roundtable today has greatly helped us in understanding what are issues now in the new normal that we find ourselves in. With that, I would like to hand over to Lisa to say a few closing words.
Thank you very much, Kaisa. Well, for me, this was most of all learning, and I really enjoyed to be in touch, to be in connection with students and teachers in Africa. I think that issues related to the teaching infrastructure are such practical and concrete things that we really should be able to solve them. I mean, we should be able to invest in these areas. As I briefly explained about our research project, which is about political science, the content of political science, and all these very interesting debates on decolonization of the content of teaching, and where the content of our university teaching and sciences are produced, and what are the asymmetric relations with the production of knowledge. Extremely challenging and difficult questions, but in order to tackle those questions also we need to solve practical issues: how to interact, how to disseminate knowledge, how to provide the access to our discussions to students. And I think that with relatively modest contributions and investments, internationally speaking, we could really make a difference. So thank you very much for all of you who contributed to this discussion. Thank you to Kaisa and Camilla who made this possible.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for those closing words. I wanted to remind you that we have promised to send you certain documents. Henning, maybe if you send the papers that you wanted to share to me, then I can put all of it in one email. I'll share the link to the AAU TV on social media, so you can see yourselves hopefully in the near future. I'll share a link to the policy notes that just came out of our project. I'll share the links to Titi Lopez's initiative, the PhD in Africa. And if anyone else has links they want shared with the group, you can send them to me by close of day, and I'll share it with the rest. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our partner, the AAU. It has been a pleasure convening with all of you, and I'm looking forward to future collaborations that might come out of this conversation today. So have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Same to you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.